You can also group your geometries. If there are multiple geometries, multiple lines, multiple objects, multiple solids and multiple references, you can just click on yes please and group everything. So once you are done and once you are set up with all these settings, you can just click on OK. Now you see I have a line inside my Rhino window that I can actually edit. So I have this particular line right here. I'll just select it and I'll move it away using the gumball tool inside Rhino. You see my grasshopper geometry is still showing. So now you also need to know, if you want to turn any piece of geometry on or off, you need to select that particular component which you want to turn off, and you need to use your central click of the mouse and turn it off. So in this case, say I want to turn this point off, this particular point. So I need to select it first and let it turn green. I need to use my central click right on the icon and it will show me this particular piece of widget. Now over here you see I have a lot of options. These are all shortcuts. You can use all these shortcuts in due time, but for now we just need to know how to turn a component off. So you see you have these two options. So you have a human head which is blindfolded and a human head which is not blindfolded. This is enable preview and this is disable preview. So using the disable preview option, you can actually turn this point off. So if you select disable preview, then you will no longer be able to see this particular point. Now notice how the color of the component changes from white to dark gray. So if your component has a dark gray color, that means it's turned off. If your component has an orange color, that means it has an error or it is not running properly. If your component has a red color, that means it's completely under error and you need to fix it as fast as possible. If your component is white like this, that means it's actually running properly. So in this case, if it is in a dark gray color like this, which means it's turned off. Now in some cases, your script might get really heavy and you might need to disable some components. So if I want to disable a component, that means I don't want it to actually work or I don't want it to actually run, but I still want the component to be there. And what you can do is you can select a component and you can use the central click once again, and you see you have the enable and disable option right here. So if you click on disable, this component will be disabled. And now notice the change in color. Now this has changed to a dull gray color. Now because this component is not running, I am not getting any output from this particular output point, which in case turns my wire into an orange color, and hence I am not getting any input over here also. So I have the start point, but according to this message balloon, I don't have the end point. Hence input parameter endpoint failed to collect data. So hence I don't have a line and hence it's giving me an error. So if you want to enable your component again, you need to select it and it will turn light green like this. You need to click on your central mouse button and you need to enable it using this particular shortcut. Now you see I can see everything again, but I cannot see this point because it's turned off. So say I also don't want to see this particular point. So I need to select it, use my central click and I need to turn it off. Now say I want to see both of these points again. You need to select it, use your central click and click on this particular icon to turn it on. And same for this point. So whichever component you want to turn on or off, you need to use your central click. And based on what you want to do, you have to select each of these options. If you want to enable or disable a component, it's the same thing. You have to use the central click on the icon of the component after selecting it, and you have to click on any of the shortcuts to either disable or enable your component. And if you want to bake any component, you have to make sure what you are baking, like whether it's the input or the output, and according to that you have to right click on that particular geometry that you actually want to bake and you have to click on bake. You also have the bake option in the central click, which means you can also central click and click on this bake shortcut right here. So say I want to create a different kind of a line using these number sliders now. So I can actually change the way my line looks by changing the values of these number sliders. And after I'm satisfied with the way my line looks, I can actually go ahead and bake this output once again. Click on OK. Now I have a different line inside Rhino and I can move it over here. So using these kinds of techniques, you can actually create multiple outputs of your design or of your geometry. Now notice how many kinds of lines I'll be able to create within a short period of time using this particular tactic. So I'll also bake this one. I'll also create some other kind of a line. I'll bake this one. So as you can see, I have created 4 kinds of lines and I've referenced them inside Rhino from Grasshopper by baking them. So I have 4 different options or 4 different outputs from a single script inside Grasshopper. So this is what is known as parametric design or a parametric script, where you can vary the options, create multiple options, create multiple outputs and select the design which appeals to you the most. Now let's look at another important component that you all should know about inside Grasshopper, which is the panel component. You can find the panel component inside the input tab over here. You have panel right here, a panel for custom notes and text values. Now the rule is, whenever you want to see any output or visualize any output that is not visible inside your Rhino window, you should always use this panel tool and you should actually connect it to any output, and you can actually see what output or what input it has or what data it has in its store. So say I connect this line output to this panel input. It actually will tell me what this component is giving me as the output. It's giving me a line which has this much length. So it's actually talking about this line right here. I can also connect my panel to any of these point outputs. So say I connect it to this point, and it will actually give me the coordinates of this particular point. So this point is actually this one. It actually gives me the coordinate of this particular point. Now you should also notice that any output can have multiple wires coming out of it. So if I want another panel component, I can just select this and I can copy it, and you see how I have another wire coming out of the same output. So you can have multiple wires coming out of the same output, and if you actually want to disconnect any wire from any output, you have to right click on that output or input for that matter, click on disconnect, and you can disconnect whichever one you actually want to. So whichever output you want to disconnect, that particular wire will actually turn red. Say I want to disconnect this panel. So you see how the wire turns red, and I can click on it and it will actually be disconnected. And also, if you want to create an input with multiple wires, so say I want to create an input with multiple wires, I want to input this line over here, I also want to input this point over here, then what you actually need to do is, you need to connect one first, then you need to hold on to shift, and then you need to create another wire and you need to input it over here. So now you see I have 2 things that I can see in my panel. I can also see the line which is coming from over here, and I can also see the coordinates of the point which is coming from over here. So in this particular way, you can actually create inputs and outputs based on what you need, and use the panel component to actually visualize what is there inside a component or what is there inside an output. You should also know that if I directly create another input from over here and plug it in without holding on to shift, then this wire will actually be cancelled and the other wire will actually be active. So if I do this without pressing shift, you see how this wire goes away now, and I have this wire in place of this wire. So I'm actually getting the output from this component, which is actually this particular line. So it's actually showing me the line which has a length of 81.94 mm, which is this line. So you can actually visualize data in 2 forms. You can visualize data graphically in your Rhino viewport, and you can also visualize data textually in your Grasshopper viewport using the panel component. You might also notice that over here in this panel component I have panel written over here, but when I actually copied it, I don't have panel written over here. You can actually remove that by selecting your panel component until it turns green. Then you can do a right click and you can see you have panel written on the top. You can just delete that, or you can put whatever name you want to and it will appear right on the top. But for now, if I don't want any other name, I'll just delete it and I'll click outside. And I have no other name on the top of my panel component. You can also see this particular thing that you have inside every panel component, which says 0, and it has 2 curly brackets in front and on its rear end. You also have these icons right here, 0, and you also have 0 and 1. So you need to understand that Grasshopper actually exchanges data in the form of something known as data trees. So every piece of data, whether it is a point or it is a line, or whether it is a surface or a mesh or a solid, every piece of data is actually exchanged through the concept of data trees. So let's understand the concept of data trees in the next video.